Today, I'm interviewing my friend Marlon. He is an amazing designer. I first met Marlon when we were both undergraduates at Stanford. He was a major in the product design program. Today, he is a phenomenal designer at Funkhouse, which is an agency that builds websites and digital portfolio assets for media houses based in the Los Angeles area. Marlon and I both came into design and the art world as we know it today. Not only is Marlon brilliant, but he is never too cool for trends. He also has a Substack that he created this past summer. His Substack is called 1500 Fridays. And I'm really curious where he got that name from. So we're going to ask him when he jumps on the call. So, one thing I want to talk about before we get into this interview with Marlon is how important it is to find friends in the design industry. And I think this has especially been important over the past 4 years since the nature of design work has changed a lot. Past the pandemic and beyond, I think even if you're freelancing, a lot of people don't realize how valuable it is to have other designers take a look at their work and give a few pieces of advice. I mentioned before that Marlon and I both entered the graphic design industry after being somewhat design adjacent, having like extremely different backgrounds and no formal art school training as I think some of our peers might in the design world. And I think while in the early 2000s, you would watch shows like The Devil Wears Prada or Ugly Betty, where you see people maybe in like design related industries like fashion magazines or who are really standoffish and not good at collaborating. It's a very old way of operating and word travels around fast. It's actually super important to form alliances that are strong, form friendships where you can help people out, give each other a little bit of career advice, tell each other your salaries. And I still talk to a lot of people who I've worked with in the past who are willing to share that type of information with me over people who maybe just try to milk my position as a way for them to get a leg up in the industry. Like I promise you, I remember everything and I don't take that stuff lightly. But that's on a personal note. I think more generally speaking, yeah, why not collaborate? Why not help people? So today we're going to interview Marlon, and he is someone who I consider to be one of my design besties. So I'm excited to share this interview with you, and we're going to jump right in. Hello, Marlon. I'm so happy to have you. Oh my gosh, you just told me you're in Atlanta. Your skin is glowing. Tell me like what you've been up to lately and also introduce yourself to the pool party.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to talk today. Yeah, my name is Marlon Antunez. I'm a graphic designer that specializes in branding and web design. I've been a designer for more than 8 years now. I would say probably like 10. Outside of design, I also like photography, recently got into tennis, and I have a Substack I started a couple months ago called 1500 Fridays. Been getting into writing about everything art, design, fashion a little bit, music a lot. So yeah, just overall creative person and like talking about art and all those things. So any opportunity I get to learn something new, whether it's a new skill or a new hobby, I'm just like, yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, I'm really curious. Could you tell us about where the name for 1500 Fridays came from? I've been following your Substack this whole summer, and not only do I love the graphics and the people you feature, but what was the inspiration for starting?
So there was a lot of like back and forth on the name. One of the first names that I thought of was called Design Points because I like a name that has multiple, can be interpreted in multiple ways. And Design Points could be like pointing you in the right direction, but also points is like a measurement in type. So it's very specific for all like the typographical nerds out there. And also, because it's a Substack and I'm trying to prove a point or make a point, like there's that literary side to it as well. So I liked that as a concept, but the name itself wasn't too exciting and wasn't really inspiring. So I went and I also was like thinking about other names, doing research. I wanted something that felt catchy, that was easy to say and brand. And I think there was other options like Out of Office. Out of Office kind of inspired 1500 Fridays because the whole idea is I just like alliteration. 1500 Fridays has a nice ring to it, but it also is like military time for 3 p.m. on Fridays, which if you lived in LA or just have any, if you work at a place that has summer Fridays, it's like by Friday, 3 o'clock, people are signing off, maybe even earlier. And it's this idea of what do we do outside of our work? And I think the inspiration behind the blog was like what you do outside of work really inspires your creativity, and it's really good to live life outside of design and read more and see art and go do it, find interests that are outside of design to just expand your mind, because I feel like one of the things I love doing is meeting people that are outside of the industry just to see how they get their perspectives, see how they navigate the world. A lot of design is about observation and listening and studying other people and things around you. So I think that time that you get for yourself outside of work, outside of the idea of productivity, when you really just get to relax and observe, I think that's really important. Even though I am working outside to make this outside of my typical 9 to 5 to make the Substack, to me, it doesn't feel like a job because I get to, it for me provides structure to do more of this design research. And because I'm like, oh, I'm providing it for other people, so it gives me an incentive. On my own, it's like hard to find that time. And I think when I log in my 9 to 5, I'm like, I don't want to think about design outside of that, but I find ways to bring in pop culture into design. My latest Substack was about the presidential campaign logos because the Harris and Walz logo came out and people on Twitter were discussing the design of it. So I thought, how can I talk about a relevant topic, but also incorporate design elements and design topics?
I love the coconut American flag imagery you included. Did you make that or did
Yeah,
you?
I did. I
Okay.
did. Oh, yeah. A little bit about the visual inspiration with 1500 Fridays was the colors were very intentional. I also wanted to go back to childhood imagination. And because I love learning, I was like, what are some scholastic elements? And the colors that came to mind were highlighter yellow, a pink eraser, and the blue lines of a composition notebook. And those were like the three colors that kind of popped in my head when I think of jotting down notes, like I remember as a kid, like scribbling doodles on my notebook as I was taking notes for like science or math class. And so that sort of memory to me feels very comfortable. And those colors remind me a lot about school, but like in an exciting way. And then I was like, I don't want to add more work to creating assets. I want it to be quick and easy. So like creating layouts on Figma that are just easy to templatize and crank out. Whenever I have a new post, I can spend like 10 minutes to just make a cover. So I went with this like cutout design that whatever, I don't make it for every post because I have posts that are a little bit longer. For the longer ones, I make a cover because I want to announce those on my Instagram. So I'll try to find, the tricky part is with images, I have to find something that isn't licensed or has like Creative Commons license that I can use. So I just basically try to find images that I can cut out and then maybe Photoshop to make it more relevant to the topic. So yeah, obviously I didn't want to go super patriotic, but I was like coconuts and the American flag. How do I combine those two? So yeah, it was a nice little, I like to be a little tongue in cheek and I like to be like, again, with the name, have some double meaning in some
I
things.
think you're so good at hitting the trends and the relevancy of design because the audio, do you think you just fell out of a coconut tree? Kamala is obviously running for the Democratic Party now. And so I just thought like it hit all the notes for me. It was like funny and tongue in cheek, but so many things. As you were talking, I was like thinking of the Scholastic Book Fair too as a kid and how fun it was to basically visit education like outside of like the structure of school and explore the things that you love. And one of the things I loved doing this summer was going to the Brand Library with you and then checking out all those art books. And what I wanted to ask you about next is basically like an overview of your life in LA and how it might have impacted your design to date. I know that you work in person and sometimes remote, but yeah, touch upon that for us.
Yeah, I think, yeah, if you asked me this question, maybe my first year in LA would be very different from now, which I have been in LA for 3 years. And it's going to change. I think there was like some TikTok or Instagram reel that I saw of a guy talking about the concept of home and how after we leave our hometown, for the people that do leave their hometowns, there's always, usually around the time we go to college or 18, we're always searching for that feeling of home afterwards. Cause then you're always saying, I'm visiting home or I'm going back home to visit. But there's this idea of you're trying to find that.
And you're from the East Coast, right? Just
Oh
for
yeah. So with LA, I think I've been leaning into this quote unquote like a suburban life. I've been saying this to my friends of finding these activities like the library. It just was one of those things where I'm like, it reminds me of things that I did when I was growing up. It's a little bit simpler. It's also free and accessible. And there's a lot of resources there. And I think it's also, you can see this happening on social media too, this whole idea of trying to be more offline and not, I think with social media, the algorithms are doing their job too well, where you see the same cycles on there. And I think it's nice to get information outside of just social media. I think it's nice to have it as a supplement, but also realize there's a lot of information and design nuggets that you can find outside of social media. So I think right now I'm in that phase of what are some free local activities that I can find in my neighborhood. I think that's another thing, is like trying to stay local to where I live and seeing what are those resources that I have access to. And yeah, I'm a big morning person. So I have my dogs here. Hey.
Oh, cuties.
Yeah. They're my sister's dogs, but
They're so sweet though, the two Frenchies. What are their names?
Sparty and Churro. Sparty's the
Churro
one.
and Sparty. I love dogs that are named after food.
Yeah. Hey, thank you. I'm a big morning person, so I love going to coffee shops. We did a couple of these sessions when you were with me. I like working around other people. I just having that white noise, and there's something about the morning energy for me. I feel like I work best between the hours of 9 a.m. and 1, and yeah, to mix it up.
Yeah, I love cafe culture in LA. There's always like really cool cafes popping up, and there's, I think, inherently a kind of creative but community feeling there. What are some of your favorite cafes in LA? To give
Well,
us
it
a
is,
favorite one.
yeah, I would say there was again, now that I've been here for 3 years, I know the cafes that are good to work at least on the east side, versus some of them are great to sit down and read, but don't have Wi-Fi or outlets. But I always go to Tartine and Silver Lake because it's convenient and close to me. I go to Just What I Needed if I want like a vegan dessert, and I think it's in Frogtown. It's right by the river, which the river was blossoming this year. It was just like really in full bloom. I think there's been LA River Project has been cleaning up the river there, and it looks like it's doing really well. So that's a nice place to grab a coffee and pastry and go walk by the river. There's another place that I like, actually two more places, like Arroz and Fun is like a Salvadorian Chinese fusion cafe that has a nice backyard patio area with Wi-Fi. And then Thank You Coffee is a very cute small shop in Chinatown. You can't really work there. You can grab a book and read outside, but it's more to bring friends and have a really good hojicha latte and buy some stationery. So there's
Yeah.
like yeah.
I love that place, and they have such great stationery and visuals. It's like a closet size. You took
Mhm.
me there,
Yeah.
and I love it. Yeah, the hojicha latte is really good.
Yeah, it's also great. I like that place because I feel like it's a good, if someone's from out of town, you could just, there's so many activities around there. There's a bookstore called Today and Tomorrow, and the LA Historic Park is right there. It's all within 5 to 10 minute walk. Yeah, I really recommend it if you have a friend, start the day there like 10 or 11 a.m. and then just walk around. Yeah, LA has a lot of like walkable areas. They're just like pockets of it. So like Chinatown, that's definitely one pocket. And then there's that coffee commissary we went to in Glendale. That was a more traditional large coffee shop. That's another good place to work.
Yeah, if you're going to the brand, you can go
Yeah.
like afterwards, and that's a fun day. And that's just like a fun Burbank crowd. People work from there too. Yeah. Okay, shifting gears a little bit, I want to talk more about TikTok trends and your relationship to being online these days, because I feel like it also changes so much. I go in and out of posting content, and
Yeah.
whoo,
It's so tough. It's like right now, like I said, I think there's this trend of people realizing that social media isn't hitting as much as it used to. I think I hear this a lot from my friends that are like, oh, I barely see like content from my friends. It's a lot of like ads. And that's really changed the landscape a bit, or just like how I interact with it. I think I wouldn't say personally for me, I think I'm trying to take a step away from social media, but I also know there's this tug and pull with it because I know, especially as a designer, it's a great way to make connections and to show your work. So I do post my work on there, but I haven't been posting. I usually just post on close friends now, like my personal updates, because I feel like I like this idea of more of curating for my specific friends what
it's
I'm
so
up to.
fun too. It's like your personal group chat, and you're just like, this is what's
Yeah.
happening in the lore of my life.
Yeah.
Uh,
And I think and it wasn't something I was like conscious of, but as I got older, it's just hard to keep up with so many people. And we have these parasocial relationships with individuals that you probably haven't talked to in years, but you still know what's up in their life. I think I'm in this moment of like, I want to like declutter the noise of what I have to keep track of, and I'm trying to I'm valuing my attention a lot more. I don't just want to give it to anyone. So I'm in this phase of where do I want to spend my energy? Where do I want to spend my attention on? And so I'm trying to be, I got off TikTok. I used to post a lot more on there. And I do miss it in some ways because TikTok was a creative way for me to post silly videos and there was a sense of community there. But I also feel like I got off of it at a time where it felt like it was the TikTok shop was launched, and then I could see that more ads were coming. And I also hear from friends that are using it more daily. They're getting a bunch of sponsored ads in their feed now too. I miss it in the way that a lot of culture happens on those apps, but I do think, like I said earlier, there are other ways of finding culture and information outside of those apps. So I think for now I use Instagram and Twitter pretty lightly. And then I've been getting more into Substack because Substack's kind of been blowing up and it's nice to hear more fully formed thoughts on that platform. It might change. I do think, I hope, or I wish there were a way that these platforms could make it less ad based, because there was, especially during the pandemic when TikTok was blowing off, there was so much creativity on those apps. I think that's what drew me in there. Like people were creating so much content. There was like funny trends, and I think there still are, but I do think like it does take away it can be a drain, like an attention drain for sure. So just trying to
I
set
agree.
some bounds with it.
I feel like my opinion is it's hard to be a passive content creator on these platforms sometimes now,
Mhm.
and you could very well be. But I also heard someone coin like this term slop is like what we're getting a lot of on TikTok now. It's AI generated content, like reverberations of gossip that isn't very demure or mindful, of like very niche influencer gossip. And then what else? Oh, yes, people marketing how to market yourself for like
Mhm.
personal marketing businesses. I see a lot of that, which I think is really interesting, kind of feeds into that how even when the niche of being a content creator now, there are people who niche down and their whole content is like teaching you how to make content and put that out there. And while I personally love education and like educational TikToks, sometimes it just feels a little too infomercial for me.
Yeah.
It's like post authentic.
It's like talking about the thing rather than doing the thing sometimes a little bit. And yeah, I think this whole idea of what's local to me, that's where I want to spend my energy more on. Yeah, the whole idea of branding yourself is still left over from social media the last 10 years, where it was really having a brand really couldn't make a difference for you. Like you can have your own business and getting like hundreds of thousands of followers could be monetized. That still is the case, but it feels a lot harder to do successfully now. But it also, as I was making more content on TikTok and stuff, I was like, do I really want to? I don't know. I just felt like I enjoyed it less and less as I was trying to make videos that I felt would build an audience, quote unquote, rather than just, I just want to post random silly stuff and not care if it gets views or not. Same thing with being on Instagram and it's back and I go back and forth on this because yes, especially if you're freelancing, it is a great way to market yourself. But for me, since I'm in a different position of I work at an agency, I don't really need to market myself. And I think that's another thing that a lot of graphic designers see is we follow other accounts, but they do that as a full-time job. They have the time to create really cool assets and show all their graphic work all the time, but that's because they treat this as their 9 to 5. So they have the time. For me, I work 9 to 5 designing for other clients. As soon as I'm clocked out, I don't want to be thinking about design again. So I'm not going to be designing a fake wine brand or a restaurant brand because I'm already tired and I feel like creatively zapped. And so I think it's always a nice reminder. These are great places for inspiration, but there are graphic designers out there that have great work. It's just done through an agency, or you don't have to be posting your latest work all the time, I would say, unless you're doing it more for marketing or business for the purpose of attracting new clients. So yeah, I think it's just reminding yourself of that. I know a lot of designer friends that are great designers, but if you go on their Instagram page, I think that's an assumption too in graphic design is if you're a graphic designer, you have to be posting your work on there all the time. And it can be a little bit tiring. I think it's nice to just post whatever you want.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like at one point, TikTok was this test tube of experimental things, and people would just get like excited and buzz around content like fruit flies. And it can still be like that sometimes. But when it comes to formal design and putting your work out there, I talk to agency owners who basically never post their work even on their own website or social media because so much of their work is just finding clients and then they'll show their work in private over email, even freelancers. I've seen some really talented artists and designers who I guess what happens is they find people to work with through word of mouth now. And I think that's really powerful. Personally, I would rather work with someone who's my friend's friend, a friend of a friend, rather than maybe even like my friend who does like a specific line of work. Yeah,
Yeah, I think it's nice to have both outlets. Like they're two avenues. And if it's working for you to market yourself online and it's bringing in business, then it works for you. I think it's just finding what works for you. Like for me, I'm not currently, I used to be a freelancer. So it was really important for me to market my work online. Right now, I don't need to. So I don't want to spend the time doing that. But
absolutely. And I feel like you're so right. It's like you work a 9 to 5 and then you're at an agency. That is like the goal already for some people to land that full-time job. And then it's like when you're done working, I think it's great that you have a balance of hobbies that are not design. Like as someone who's your friend who's seen you do tennis and go to events like rock climbing gym, I think it's so important to have a life outside of work because
yeah,
you really just turn yourself into a little design robot. And then that kind of sucks the joy out of design too.
yeah, I think it's just important to outside of with any industry really, it's I think we define ourselves a lot by what we do for work and our productivity, and it's like trying to not just be like, oh, I'm Marlon and I'm a graphic designer, but it's there's so many more other things that I enjoy as well. So
Yeah, it's a little.
I'm trying to practice that more.
What are you listening to these days, music wise?
That's a good question. Definitely have been bumping the Clairo album, Charm. It's been on, it's such a good album to have playing in the background. It just flows really nicely. Yeji just came out with a new song called Boo. It's really fun. It's like this little bit house. It's like very much her style, Y2K aesthetic. It's nice.
I
And
saw
then
her remixing the Wii soundtrack on a Boiler Room set.
oh, it's so good. I'm trying to think last albums. Oh, I've been listening to this artist called Lola Young. I think she's like from the UK. Lava LaRue. I missed her album that came out earlier this year. Really good. That one is like usually outside of my, it was indie, but a lot of rock and roll influences in that album. And it's just like a sound that I am not so familiar with. And I think she did a good job of blending her vocals with that genre. I don't know. I had a good time. I'm looking through my Spotify and saved like 8 of her songs from that album. So sometimes I do that where I like to listen to the full project in order to see what the artist's intention was. I feel like with an album, artists can be really intentional of like how they want you to listen to it and the order of their songs. So it's nice to listen it through that way. Yeah, I'm trying to think what else.
Did you ever find that tool that helps you migrate your Spotify playlist?
Yeah, one of my friends, let me see what they said. Yeah, there is a tool to migrate. So I'm gonna probably try Apple Music for a little bit to see. There was two things that made me think about it. One, someone was saying that the audio quality was better on Apple Music, but he was saying it's you only notice it if you have really good headphones or speakers. And the website is called is with iz.com. And then the other one was I saw this New Yorker article that I need to like actually read. It had a firewall on it, but it said something about, oh, I quit my Spotify subscription because of the algorithms. And I do think that is an extreme take. You
No,
definitely,
take.
yeah, it's like Spotify definitely pushes a lot of the same songs. And I think it's your job to be like, all right, I'm listening to this song too many times. Skip or go find an artist and then start a radio based off that artist. So I try to do that a lot because it just brings new artists to the front rather than just like going through your liked songs or just playing a radio of a popular artist because it can very easily just give you the same songs over and
I
over.
don't like that change that Spotify made where like you're listening to Dua Lipa and then suddenly it'll just push like the new Billie Eilish track. It felt really like Pandora Radio to me, like when they made that change this summer.
Yeah, I felt that a lot. Like I think we noticed that when Lunch came out, and it for me it like ruined that song a little bit because it was like, okay, I get it. Like the album's really good. I don't need to be like every time it was some pop artist, like the next song was like Lunch by Billie Eilish, and I was like, I just don't want to listen to this song now.
Yeah, I get it. You have a partnership or something. Like it's
It
not
kind
like
of
suspicious. I was getting
it
suspicious.
it definitely, yeah, it was a little bit suspicious. So I Yeah, I think I just try to navigate. It is like extra work. It's okay, let me go through my library and find like this obscure artist, start the radio and just see what that pumps out. But even then, I can still feel very algorithmic. So I also listen to KCR Public Radio. That's local LA radio out of Santa Monica College. You heard me talk about this a lot too. They do public events during the summer. It's called KCRW Summer Nights. They have their own set of DJs that play music. I listen to it every morning on my commute to work, but I also like to listen to it at night because they just play a lot of good artists that you don't hear.
And it's like the best way to get the news too, because there's so matter of fact with it. I love it.
Yeah, they include like NPR news stories. They also have their own local LA stories. And then I don't know, I think the selection of music there is really good. It's curated. And again, I think in general, I'm seeing this trend of people trying to push away from algorithms and do more of this curation element, whether it's on social media or just on music apps. Music apps specifically, I think there's this other app that I tried called, I believe, not to be mistaken with the
Rover.
yeah, walking app.
Yes.
I think it was called like ROVR. Yeah, ROVR. And ROVR.live is the website, but there's an app as well. And it's like a radio run by different DJs, and they'll have an hour where they'll play their set.
You know what I love? That DJ set where they did in front of the elevator.
Yes, YouTube. Yeah, YouTube also has a bunch of great channels. It's called Elevator Music. We listen to that. That one I check frequently too, because they'll have a DJ come on. I do a lot of like boiler room sets. Elevator Music is a good one.
I love the concept. Like they're in an elevator or in front of an elevator sometimes, and there'll be like two people dancing in the background, and then the DJ just
Yeah.
vibing, doing their thing. That's cute.
No, it's a great, yeah. I love, again, that's like I love things that are cheeky like that have a pun. Obviously, like elevator music is like a term that we use, and I thought it was a really smart concept. So that to me is design too. Like it's not just the visuals, but it's also the whole concept now. And that's really, it's a super simple concept, but it's very effective and it's wide enough that a lot of people can come on there and play their music. And there's a little bit for everyone, which is nice.
It's easy to pick up. And I've also been seeing a lot of this like recession core, like office type vibe in music lately, even with Charlie XCX and her style and promoting Brat for this summer. I saw in her birthday party, she wore like these little undies that were basically like suit pants. Like they had buttons on them that kind of looked like suit pants. That was cute. And then the little office glasses. And now for a quick break. Hi friends, it's Jules, and thank you for listening to this interview with Marlon. I just wanted to come on really quickly and let you know that throughout this fall and into the winter, I will be interviewing designers on the podcast. If you know a friend who is a cool designer that you think has a story to share, have them hit me up. Go to my website, juliaspero.me, that's JuliaEspero.me, and send me an email. Introduce yourself, tell me who you are, and I'd love to interview you, hear about your work and what you're doing now, what gives you inspiration. We can chat about it more on the pool party. Next thing I wanted to let you know about is that I'm offering key art services for musicians, writers, podcasters, and live event specialists. Do you have a brand that you need to bring up to life? I would love to help you with key art. You can book a free consultation with me on my website, and we can chat more about if this service is right for you. All right, now back to our interview. So thank you so much for sharing your background with us. Now, my next question for you is essentially like, what advice would you have for your younger self? Any advice you might have for like people who are just starting out?
Yeah, I think this is nice to talk about because I'm also a self-taught graphic designer. So a lot of this advice would probably be find the things that really interest you. I think there's so many avenues that you could go with design and in general. Like you could go down the UI UX route. You could go down branding, web design. You could be, if you have an illustration background, you can fuse art and design or work on posters or movie graphics. I think if you're someone who's fresh out of college, be easy on yourself. Take the time to explore all these different interests you have. Like you have more time than you think you do. This is a career. And even for me, I've been doing this for 8 to 10 years now, depending on when you look at it. There's still so many things I can continue learning and want to learn. A little over a year ago, I took a class on typography and I just wanted to focus on the basics of typography, even a little bit of the history, how to use it properly, how to space things properly. And it's always good to, even if you're someone that's seasoned or you've been in your career for a couple of years, it's always good to look back at the basics of design to remind yourself, because I feel like when you're in it in the day to day, you forget the principles, or it's almost like autopilot. And just having a refresher on it, whether it's like grids or type hierarchy or even like basic technical skills on Adobe, it's nice to refresh in and see what new tools are out there. I think that's another challenge of being a designer today, is like keeping up with all these new tools, and it can feel very overwhelming. But I think it is important, or a good reminder, that you don't have to be good at everything. Honestly, if you just find things that really interest you and maybe specialize in that a little bit, it's good to have a knowledge of what's possible and different, have a breadth of design. But if you're, again, if your strengths are illustration, like Jules, I know you have a really good art and illustration background, like that makes your work really unique, and you have a good perspective of blending those styles together. So that's what's going to make you stand out, if in a kind of more recruiter sense, or if you're looking for clients. I think finding your voice in design is really important. And then, yeah, if you're into branding work, then studying and looking at other companies and theirs, and maybe even considering, what would I do if I rebranded this brand? Or yeah, I think it's just good to observe and take in and see what else is out there, and always like question what would what would your perspective be if you had to rebrand this project or something like that.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with that. Don't just accept what people show you. You
Yeah.
have very valid opinion,
Mhm.
especially designers too. It's the way things have been done isn't always the best. And
Mhm.
the industry is changing so much. So it's like right out at the start of your career, you have the opportunity to shape it and get new energy.
Yeah, that's a very good point. It's very easy to fall into your same tropes or same process. And that's why it's nice to be, when you have a younger designer on the team, they're bringing fresh perspectives, and even just collaborating in general. I feel like graphic design could be a very individual experience, or a lot of times you're working by yourself, but it's nice to soundboard with other designers or just other people to get that perspective, because you can really be in in the weeds of a project and not realize how other people might apply a different context on it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think, yeah, it's nice to keep it fresh.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And now I want to ask you about basically the dreams and visions you have for what you want to do. It doesn't have to be design related because, like you mentioned, we can be so like career focused sometimes. I think we lived in a different world where like everything was so like you do X and then Y and then Z. So if you could like do anything you wanted day to day, what would it be? What does that look like?
If there, I don't know if I would want to do this forever, but there is like a part of me that's, oh, if money didn't matter, like I would want to, the next thing I just want to like deep dive into is just spending some time like cooking more. And I have this vision of, I want to live in a cabin or by a pasture in like this nice green area by the mountains, maybe outside of the US, and just spend my time baking bread and cooking. I don't know why. I feel like I'm in this home, or like there's like I'm trying to think of a word, just like being at home era and finding joy in like simpler things. But I think I would also probably get bored after a while. So that would be just like a small era. I think dream wise, that's something I've been asking myself a lot recently, because I'm about to be 30 and I'm excited for that prospect, because I keep thinking like there's still much more life ahead of me, and maybe I'm not doing design forever, or maybe I find a new passion. I think with the pandemic, I proved to myself, or made it less scary to think about switching careers or taking on something new. Obviously, there's value in building your career in a certain way, but to me, I feel like I also find value in just learning new things. It's obviously harder as you get older to switch. And if you want to build a family and stuff like that, it might not be as easy. But I don't know. There's a part of me, it's not fully defined yet, but I do want to travel more, maybe work abroad. Those are things that I've always been curious about, for the whole idea of bringing other perspectives. And design outside of the US, looking at what other designers are doing outside of the US is really interesting to me. I think design in Mexico City has been blowing up, design in South Korea, design obviously like Northern Europe, like Stockholm, Finland. And there's just other places that I feel like are booming in their cultures in other metropolitan areas and even outside of metropolitan areas. So yeah, I think there's also part of me that wants to travel a little bit more, maybe live abroad for a short amount of time.
I could really see you doing that, having a design abroad era. Yeah, and I think that would be fun to incorporate different cultures and that whole process you discussed working with people.
I had this thought today where I'm like, I just love observing people. I don't know if it's like this like black sheep syndrome or just being in a room and seeing the dynamics between people. And that's why I love traveling abroad and also traveling alone sometimes because it gives me the time to just sit in quiet and also just enter different spaces as an observer and like a bystander. I don't know, there's something really about that that's fascinating and being a fly on the wall a little bit.
About wallflower.
Yeah, exactly.
This leads me to my next question. We're going to do rapid fire now. Charlie XCX son or thought daughter?
I think right now I'll go with Charlie XCX son.
Okay, NYC or Los Angeles?
Oh, that's hard. I'm gonna go with Los Angeles. That's a hard one.
Spotify playlists or vinyl records?
Ooh, vinyl records right now too. Yeah, I found some recent good ones.
Sneakers or cowboy boots?
I love a good cowboy boot, but day to day, it's just you can't go wrong with a sneaker. Got to go comfortable.
I so hear that. Morning person or night owl?
Definitely morning person. I do have insomnia, but I'm more energized and more excited for the prospect of a day.
And then last one, Nintendo Switch or rock climbing gym?
Ooh, honestly, I've been in my Switch era recently. I think I used to be a huge gamer and then I go back and forth. But again, it's been nice to just lose yourself in a video game. I
What
think
are
it's
you
also because
playing?
it's the summer that I'm not like rock climbing as much because it's more indoors. But I think in the fall I'll pick it up again.
Yeah, what are you playing these days?
A lot of Zelda, and then there's a game called Boomerang Fu, which is like a mini game. Do you have a Switch?
I
And
do actually. And then my nephews just came over and they've been going to the library and getting games there because you can,
oh wait, that's I didn't even know
yeah.
that's really nice.
But we've been Smash.
Oh, I love Smash. Yeah, no, I want to get. I haven't bought a game for it yet. Literally, this Zelda was like a. Oh no, I bought Zelda, but Mario Kart was included in the Switch, and then I just bought a bunch of mini games. Boomerang Fu is like you play as like different food items, like an avocado or like a milk carton, and then you're just going around and trying to slash like basically kill the other players. It's really funny and it's fun. It's not super violent. You're like just
Sounds
like
cute.
it's like Fruit Ninja, but you are the fruit and you're trying to like be the last man standing. Yeah. And there's like a demo of it. So I bought that for free and you can play with up to 4 people. That's a fun multiplayer game.
Marlon, thank you so much for joining me today. I enjoyed having you. You're awesome. We need to have you back again. And then
Yeah.
as we leave, I want you to pick a card.
Yes, I
One,
missed
two,
this.
or
Okay.
three.
I because this is a podcast, Jules is holding. We had this ritual every morning, and I looked forward to it so much because it was nice. But these special animal tarot cards, so she's holding 3 in her hands, and it was a nice morning routine. I'm gonna go with number 1. Yeah.
We have kangaroo, eliminate distractions.
Oh my God. No, literally, that's been my kind of motto recently, like eliminating distractions. It's been really nice. Maybe I've taken it too far, but it's been nice to just, there's a lot of noise right now. So I'm trying to just,
Cut through the noise, develop
yeah.
a goal, and just breathe.
Yeah, exactly. Wow, that is funny. I always love pulling these cards because there's something.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much having you here. Have a beautiful day. And then I will text you. Let's keep on
I
talking.
was gonna say this could go on for another hour, but we
Really could probably schedule another one. Let's do that.
thanks so much for having me and have a great rest of your day too.
Bye.
Yeah.
So, in this episode, Marlon talks a bit about choosing to go onto Substack to collate his thoughts on design and living life. I definitely think you should go follow his Substack just to get like a clear picture of what's going on there. I wanted to come on here and as we close up this episode, talk about new types of media and design. I think that design is one of those complicated lines of work to choose at times because there's so many different things you could design. And I think when it comes to pursuing design as an education or a line of coursework when you go to school, it's going to vary a lot depending on if you go to an art school or you do a boot camp in a very specific line of design or you're a product designer or an interior designer. I think what makes a lot of these roles very similar among the different types of things you could design is a process. And I think process and research is something incredibly important to follow in design because truly most things are pretty derivative. Everything comes from somewhere. We're not really in an age where most things haven't been done before. if you have an idea, you could probably Google it and it might have been done like slightly differently by someone else. And there's nothing wrong with that. And so I think we're like in this era of the world, and especially with the internet, where many things are remixes. And I think calling something derivative can sometimes be negative, but there's really nothing wrong with taking inspiration from something. After all, we are all humans and we're somewhat derivatives of our parents and all the information that we've been exposed to up until this point in time. So, when it comes to talking about design, one thing that I found interesting when I went to school, studied urban studies, which had to do a lot with design of urban spaces and cities and signage, and then sociology. I wanted to get more tactile skills in creating graphic design work because I really loved designing for cities and for the people within cities in a way that really made tangible sense. One of the things that I learned when I pursued design and the world changed is that you can follow this process of design and adapt to the people who are going to be using it, but mediums may change over time. And I think that the mediums we use are so affected by the trend cycle and the attention spans of people. People used to say that print is dead. And now sometimes people still create print work because we have nostalgia for magazines and books. And honestly, I've talked about this a lot. Some print products are print works, books, indie print projects are my favorite things to design. I miss making posters and I imagine myself making a lot of posters when I was in design school, but rarely these days do you get a client who hires you for a poster project, or if they do, it's mainly hypothetical and you digitally render it to put it on social media in order to distribute it to your fan base through that medium. So there are a lot of remixes of media these days, even of like making something look real, as in like physical, tangible, but really it's digital, it lives online. A digital rendering of a poster that is in a city is a good example of that. Or we kind of go the other way around, where like something is totally tangible in real life, but we want to boost it, and so we capture it digitally and then find ways of distributing it through social networks that have very active audiences. And that's also an art as well, like finding ways to curate and tap into networks and groups of people that have niche interests. And I think people used to think about the internet as this big swamp where you just kind of put it and test and see what happens. It can still be that way, but it is kind of stratified now where there's very niche groups and you can target people by demographic and there is some crossover. Yet, I think there is something to say about keywords, also launching an idea and a product, knowing trends if you don't have an audience. And I think people eye roll at that, but that is the art of launching a product or a project online. It's getting it right without being too salesy. And while I could lament about how some of my language has become a bit corporate because I've entered corporate spaces and startups, I think what I'm seeing now at times is even corporate clients who will hire designers and pay premium just to make something not seem overly marketed, to highly design something so that it kind of has like that online Reddit and Vine flavor. And then at the other end of the spectrum too, I see people who succeed in having a lot more polished, marketable work, but they're not corporations. And I think this is something that is a little bit hard to explain because everyone has a different taste for like the level of what a design product should be. But at the end of the day, the people who get to sign off on work are the audience, the customer base, the community. And I think sometimes those words are used interchangeably because we are kind of like in this very weird phase of markets and the economy where people either want to be like very transparently sold to, or they would rather be a part of a community first and then have a product second. So I could use the word product, project interchangeably because they kind of are. And as you spend some time in the world of design, as I have over the past few years, strategies kind of tend to be the same, but audiences change. And then so do deliverables. And so that's like where the fun experimentation comes from. But at the end of the day, it's a very similar process. And I think it's kind of fun to talk to other people in adjacent lines of work, what they're seeing, what they like to listen to, how they find things, because I think some of the most cool and tongue-in-cheek ways of creating bubble up from the underground and some of these like side conversations we have. They don't just like live out there, obviously, for someone to kind of like take up and appropriate right away. I think this is kind of like maybe some of the annoyance people see when big corporations start to jump on trends like demure or brat summer or some of these more like subcultures. And frankly, I still don't think that trends die even when corporations come and harvest them for their own use. I think depending on who you are and what your position is within like this stratified pond of the internet, you can still use like keywords to your advantage. But at the end of the day, it's going to be the people who engage with or don't engage with your content that get to determine how well you do. So on that note, that might sound like so daunting, but what I find really works for a lot of content creators online, on TikTok, on YouTube, Substack, whatever, if you're an independent creator, consistency is so important. And consistency kind of comes out of repetition. And you can achieve consistency two ways: through consistently arriving at your work and producing a short piece of content, whether that's like a podcast or a video, weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, being consistent in that, or finding ways of producing your work that you like and then continuing to do it until it sticks and it makes sense. Another trend that was popular this past month was by this chef Logan on TikTok, who takes a cucumber and makes a cucumber salad with a mandolin every day. And you can find his TikTok and see that all his videos are basically like the same thing: slicing the cucumber, seasoning it. And then I saw enough people like trying it too, where it's like, oh, that's a derivative of that guy who makes a cucumber salad. And yeah, it sounds very simple, maybe even trivial, but it's also authentic. And again, I think that word comes up, and we're like in a post-authentic society, and whatever authenticity means when you show up online, because people don't really want to see authenticity a lot. They want to see something that hits. And to get content that hits and feels right takes quite a bit of work. I think while sometimes online and short form video content, like on places like TikToks, what you'll see does well are like think pieces and people chatting. It honestly only really does well if you've taken the time to build an audience when algorithms were giving. So a part of this is timing, and you can't really time content, but what you can do is being consistent. It's kind of like that phrase in investing: you can't time the market. Like, time in the market outweighs timing the market. So I think the same is true for content, where time making content outweighs timing trends. That's it, right there. And I think the ways that we perceive and we value culture are changing. So I think what people want to see is like consistency in creators, and not just like, some big corporation like randomly deciding to make a TikTok and then just harvesting off of trends. So that is my 2 cents on trends and new media and basically like interaction. And yeah, that's just what I'm noticing for 2024 at this moment in time. and I hope you enjoyed this episode. I am preparing another episode for next week on boundaries, on choosing which projects to take on. I've talked a lot about consistency and passion projects, making work even when you don't have formal design work. And on a personal note, I have some exciting news. I think I finally finished or figured out my schedule in design. I think this has been like a wild ride these past 4 years. I went from basically being in design school still and freelancing during the pandemic to then working full time at a social media agency to then like taking basically 2 years off of work to just pursue content creation. But not really. I was just burnt out. And then going to a generative AI startup that started as a crypto startup, realizing I really hated that and I just really wanted nothing to do with anything that seemed like remotely close to corporate life. And then pursuing a bunch of bridge jobs like teaching Legree, which is an advanced form of Pilates, or it's actually its own thing. And then doing a bunch of like odd jobs, just trying to figure out if I still love design. And then starting this podcast, which helped me put together some of my thoughts and observations of how I've seen the design market change. Because I think the world that I imagine entering as I was like pursuing design school and then I graduated was vastly different. And I had some cognitive dissonance about what I wanted to do. And I think these days what I'm realizing is like I really need a lot of time to pursue personal projects. And I can get a personal project out like once a month, but I love to really tailor it and make it so that I can research and then plan for passion projects. But at the same time, we all need income. So what's been working for me is having 2 contract jobs that basically net me about 30 hours. That is like enough stability for me to continue pursuing my passions. And I like this. I like the way it feels so far. I'm still like very early in trying out this new schedule, but again, I think one of my big goals for 2024 was just to figure out my career, how it's going to work for me, how it's going to exist in the conditions of the quote unquote market, and what was going to make me happy. Because I'm someone who thought for a really long time that like doing whatever society or people told me was like the good thing to do was what was going to make me happy just because external validation. But I think after like many times of trying full-time corporate or startup, I just realized like no job or amount of money was ever worth like trading in my happiness or my health. And sometimes I'd spend like way more money when I was deeply unhappy and unsatisfied. And there's actually a lot of ways of making money today that don't involve trading your time. And sometimes like the larger 40-hour work week corporate system is just a great way of keeping us consumers of convenience and paying for convenience. I'm someone who will pay for convenience if it makes sense for me personally, but it's really stopped making a lot of sense for me. And I would actually really truly enjoy doing a lot of things myself just for the satisfaction of it. If I can slow down and do that. So I'm grateful for that revelation. And in the meantime, too, I think things are still changing. What I found is that if I work 2 part-time roles around like 30 hours a week, if one of them goes under for whatever reason, not enough clients or, just like wrong team, I can swap it in for something else. And I'm growing my illustration work. I make key art for podcasters, DJs, live event specialists, and writers. And if you want to bring your brand to life, come hit me up. You can go to my website, juliasparrow.me, and check out my illustration and key art services. This has been this episode of The Pool Party. Please feel free to rate and follow this podcast. If you have any questions, any topics on design and working today, especially as a new grad or someone in your 20s or 30s, maybe you're making a career transition, I would love to explore those topics with you. So let me know. And Thank you so much for joining me today on this episode of The Pool Party.